what they said I did. I know for a fact it wasn't true. I didn't headlock her. I didn't beat her with the door. I only try to diffuse the situation. They keep deflecting away from that. And what I did what they saying I did made it sound harsh, and I didn't do that.
She walked into court facing 1 murder charge. She walked out facing 6. 5 additional charges filed against the woman who shot an unarmed mother 4 times in broad daylight. The prosecution is tightening the noose. But here's where it gets even more complicated. The man who was there, the father of both women's children, the one accused of holding the victim down while his girlfriend fired, just took the stand. And he's denying everything. Carlos Smith says prosecutors have it all wrong. But the evidence tells a different story. And the Romeca Meeks case just exploded wide open. Stay with me because what happened in that courtroom changes everything. Before we dive into these absolutely explosive developments, if you're new to One Crime at a Time, welcome to the channel where we don't just report crime stories. We analyze them, we question them, and we demand accountability. If you value real investigative storytelling that goes beyond the headlines, hit that like button right now, smash that subscribe button, and make sure you click the bell icon because this case is developing rapidly and you need every update as it happens. Now let's break down what just went down in court. Let's set the stage because if you're just joining us or need a refresher, you need to understand how we got to this moment. September 8th, 2025. That's last year. A Monday morning in Chicago's South Loop neighborhood. 31-year-old Romeca Meeks Blackman, a nursing student, a devoted mother, drops her 6-year-old son off at school. She's tucked a handwritten note in his lunchbox. The note says, "Happy Monday, son. Today is a fresh start to this day, and you can start off strong. Always remain yourself. You're the coolest, smartest, and funniest kid I know. I love you so much, and you make me so proud. Have a great day." Those were some of the last words Romeca would ever write. Within minutes, she would be gone. Shot multiple times at close range by a woman she had never met before that day. And the man who helped make it possible? Carlos Smith, the father of her child. For context, Carlos Smith goes by several names online. Carlos Lozo's Way, Rackboy Loso. But his legal name is Carlos Smith, and he's at the center of this entire tragedy. Carlos had a child with Romeca. Then he started a relationship with Quadaja Holly Johnson, and they also had a child together. So you've got this triangle of tension. The mother of his first child, the mother of his second child, and Carlos caught in the middle. Except he wasn't just caught in the middle. According to prosecutors, he actively participated in what happened on September 8th, 2025. And for months, he stayed relatively quiet while his girlfriend Holly Johnson took the legal heat. But January 8th, 2026, Carlos Smith finally spoke. He took the stand in court. And what he said is raising serious questions about credibility, about loyalty, and about what really happened that morning. Let's go back to September 8th, 2025, and walk through what prosecutors say happened. Carlos Smith and Holly Johnson were together that morning. They had their 6-month-old baby with them. Carlos drove Holly to 20 West Cermak, where her car was parked. They placed their infant into Holly's vehicle. At around the same time, Romeca had just completed her school drop-off and was in the area. The two women encountered each other. And according to witness testimony that prosecutors have presented in court, an argument broke out. Now here's where things get critical. Prosecutors allege that Carlos Smith didn't just stand by and watch. They say he got physically involved. Specifically, they allege that Carlos physically assaulted Romeca before she was killed. Witnesses reported seeing Carlos restrain Romeca, putting her in a position where she couldn't defend herself or escape. Some witnesses described it as a chokehold. Others said he slammed a car door on her. The details vary slightly depending on the witness, but the core allegation remains the same. Carlos used physical force to restrain Romeca Meeks Blackman. While Carlos was allegedly restraining her, Holly Johnson made a decision. She walked to her vehicle, retrieved a firearm, returned to where Romeca was being held, and fired. Not once. Not twice, but 4 times. Prosecutors say she fired once, paused, and then fired again. That pause is critical. It suggests this wasn't a panicked reaction. It wasn't a split-second decision made in the heat of fear. It was a deliberate choice. 1 shot, a moment to think. Then more shots. Romeca was struck in the face, chin, and thigh. She collapsed. Emergency responders rushed her to Stroger Hospital, but she was pronounced deceased. A mother who had just told her son he was the coolest kid she knew would never see him again. Her son would open that lunchbox, read that note, and have no idea his entire world had just shattered. But here's what makes this even more disturbing. According to prosecutors, after Holly Johnson shot Romeca, she and Carlos Smith fist bumped. Yes, you heard that right. A fist bump. Right there in the street. After taking someone's life. That's not the behavior of someone acting in self-defense. That's not the reaction of someone who just experienced a traumatic, life-threatening situation. That's celebration. That's a gesture of triumph. And when that detail came out in court, it fundamentally undermined any claim that Holly was acting out of fear or necessity. Because if you're truly afraid for your life, if you've just been forced into a situation where you had no choice but to use lethal force, you don't celebrate afterward. You're shaking. You're crying. You're in shock. You're not giving high fives or fist bumps to your partner. Holly Johnson was arrested at the scene. But then something frustrating happened. She was released. Despite eyewitness testimony. Despite video evidence. Despite the fact that she admitted on camera she had used her weapon. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office said there wasn't enough information to make a charging decision at that time. For nearly 3 months, from September 2025 to early December 2025, Romeca's family had to live with the knowledge that their loved one was gone and no one was being held accountable. Romeca's mother, Tina McMiller, became a powerful voice for justice. She spoke at vigils. She gave interviews. She said, "I am broken. I am so broken." She described her daughter as kind, loving, supportive, and an amazing mother. And she shared something heartbreaking about her grandson, Romeca's son, who had just turned 7. She said he had shut down emotionally. He didn't want to be around people. He was preparing for what should have been a joyful birthday, but instead he was grieving, confused, and traumatized. The community rallied around the family. A Change.org petition demanding charges against Holly Johnson gathered thousands of signatures. Social media exploded with calls for justice. People shared the video. They analyzed the timeline. They demanded to know why someone could shoot an unarmed woman in broad daylight and walk free. The pressure built. And finally, on December 4th, 2025, charges were filed. Holly Johnson was charged with first-degree murder. It was a huge victory for the family and for everyone who had been demanding accountability. On December 5th, 2025, Holly appeared in court. That's when some stunning details emerged. First, Holly Johnson was pregnant. She stood before the judge carrying another child while facing murder charges for taking a mother's life. Second, prosecutors revealed that Holly had never met Romeca in person before the day she killed her. Despite filing protective orders against Romeca, despite claiming she felt threatened, the two women had never had a face-to-face encounter until September 8th, 2025. That revelation confirmed what many had suspected. Those protective orders weren't about genuine safety concerns. They were strategic. They were designed to create a legal paper trail that could later be used to justify a claim of self-defense. The judge ordered Holly Johnson to remain in custody without bond. Her case moved forward through the legal system. And then January 8th, 2026, everything changed again. Holly Johnson appeared in court facing not just the original first-degree murder charge, but 5 additional charges. That's right, 5 new charges. The prosecution is escalating. They're building a more comprehensive case. Now, we don't have the specific details yet about what those 5 additional charges are, but based on Illinois law and typical prosecution strategies in cases like this, they could include things like aggravated battery with a firearm, armed violence, unlawful use of a weapon, aggravated discharge of a firearm, or even child endangerment given that this incident occurred near a school and Holly's own infant was present. Each additional charge represents another angle the prosecution is using to ensure accountability. It shows they're not taking any chances. They're covering every possible legal avenue to make sure Holly Johnson faces the full consequences of her actions. But that's not all that happened in court. Holly Johnson's defense team made a bold move. They argued for her release. Yes, they actually asked the judge to let her out while the case moves forward. Their argument? They claim to have evidence that contradicts the state's version of events. Specifically, they say they have 911 recordings and surveillance video that tell a different story than what prosecutors are presenting. They're also challenging the credibility of the state's key witness. This is classic defense strategy. Attack the prosecution's narrative. Raise doubt. Present alternative explanations. Make the jury question what they think they know. But here's the thing. The judge wasn't buying it. The request for Holly's release was denied. She remains in custody. And that tells you something about how strong the prosecution's case is. Because judges don't keep defendants locked up without bond unless they believe there's substantial evidence of guilt and a significant risk to public safety. Now let's talk about the other major development. Carlos Smith testified. This is huge. For months, Carlos had been relatively quiet. He posted on social media after Romeca's death, saying it was the worst day of his life. People criticized him for not showing enough emotion, for his role in what happened, for not being held accountable. Carlos Smith took the stand and spoke under oath. And what did he say? He denied everything. According to reports from the courtroom, Carlos Smith denied prosecutors' claims about his involvement. He's saying he didn't physically assault Romeca. He's saying he didn't fist bump Holly after the shooting. He's calling for justice, positioning himself as someone who wants the truth to come out. But here's the problem with Carlos's testimony. It directly contradicts what multiple witnesses have said. It contradicts what prosecutors have alleged based on their investigation. It contradicts the physical evidence and the timeline. So we have to ask ourselves, why would Carlos Smith deny his involvement when witnesses saw him restrain Romeca? Why would he dispute the fist bump when prosecutors are confident enough to present it as fact? There are a few possible explanations. First, Carlos might genuinely believe his version of events. Maybe from his perspective, he was trying to break up a fight, not assault anyone. Maybe he doesn't remember the fist bump or interprets it differently. Memory is fallible, especially in high-stress situations. But that explanation only goes so far when you have multiple independent witnesses saying the same thing. Second, Carlos might be lying to protect himself. If he admits to restraining Romeca while she was shot, he's essentially admitting to being an accomplice in her murder. He could face serious criminal charges himself. So there's a strong incentive for him to deny everything and hope the prosecution can't prove his involvement beyond a reasonable doubt. Third, Carlos might be trying to protect Holly. If he can create doubt about what really happened, if he can make it seem like witnesses were mistaken or confused, it helps Holly's defense. It supports her claim that she acted in self-defense and that the prosecution has the facts wrong. But here's what's undeniable. Prosecutors felt confident enough to publicly allege that Carlos Smith physically assaulted Romeca before she was killed and that he fist-bumped Holly afterward. They wouldn't make those allegations in open court without evidence to back them up. They know those claims can be challenged, cross-examined, and picked apart by the defense. So the fact that they're standing by those allegations tells us they have something solid. Whether it's video evidence, audio recordings, witness testimony, or a combination of all three, the prosecution believes they can prove Carlos's involvement. And that puts Carlos in a very difficult position. Because even if he's not charged right now, his testimony creates a permanent record. If prosecutors later decide to bring charges against him, they can use his own words against him. They can point to inconsistencies. They can show where his story doesn't match the evidence. And that makes it much harder for him to defend himself. Let's talk about the defense's claim that they have 911 recordings and surveillance video that contradict the state's version. This is interesting because it suggests there might be more to this story than what's been publicly reported. Maybe the surveillance video shows something different than what witnesses described. Maybe the 911 calls include statements that support Holly's self-defense claim. Or maybe the defense is grasping at straws, trying to create reasonable doubt where none really exists. We won't know until that evidence is presented in court and both sides have a chance to argue about what it means. But the fact that the judge still denied Holly's release even after hearing about this supposed contradictory evidence suggests the judge isn't convinced it's as strong as the defense claims. Judges see these tactics all the time. Defense attorneys often promise smoking gun evidence that will change everything, and then it turns out to be less impressive when actually examined. So the judge is taking a wait-and-see approach. Show me the evidence in the proper legal context, let the prosecution respond, and then we'll evaluate it fairly. Meanwhile, Romeca's family continues to grieve and fight for justice. Tina McMiller is raising her grandson, trying to help him process trauma no child should experience. In early December 2025, community activists and a local towing company selected Romeca's son for a Secret Santa campaign. They brought gifts, bikes, and a check for $3,500 to help with his care. It was a beautiful gesture, a reminder that people care and that this little boy hasn't been forgotten. But no amount of presence can replace his mother. No financial support can undo the trauma of losing a parent to violence. And no act of community kindness can fill the void Romeca left behind. Her son is growing up without his mother because of choices other people made. Choices driven by jealousy, anger, possessiveness, or whatever toxic emotions led to that confrontation on September 8, 2025. So where does the case go from here? Holly Johnson is in custody facing 6 charges. Her defense team is fighting hard, claiming they have evidence that will exonerate her or at least create reasonable doubt. The prosecution is standing firm, presenting a timeline and evidence that they believe proves premeditation, intent, and a complete lack of justification for the use of lethal force. Carlos Smith has testified and denied his involvement, but prosecutors continue to allege he played a direct role in assaulting Romeca before she was killed. The question everyone is asking is whether Carlos will be charged. The evidence seems to support charges of at least accessory to murder, if not something more serious. But so far, no charges have been filed against him. And with each passing day, it becomes more frustrating for those demanding full accountability. This case is going to trial. There will be more hearings. More evidence will be presented. Witnesses will be cross-examined. Expert testimony might be introduced. And eventually, a jury will have to decide. Did Holly Johnson act in self-defense? Or did she commit murder? Did Carlos Smith assist in that murder? Or was he just an unfortunate bystander caught in a tragic situation? The answers to those questions will determine not just the legal outcome, but also whether Romeca's family feels that justice has been served. Because for them, this isn't just about convictions and prison sentences. It's about accountability. It's about making sure the world knows that Romeca's life mattered, that she was a loving mother, a dedicated student, a cherished daughter and sister, and that her death wasn't just some unfortunate incident, but a crime that demands consequences. Let me ask you some questions. Do you believe Carlos Smith's testimony that he didn't assault Romeca and didn't fist bump Holly after the shooting? Or do you think he's lying to protect himself and his girlfriend? What do you make of the defense's claim that they have 911 recordings and surveillance video that contradict the prosecution? Do you think that evidence is real and significant, or is it a legal tactic to create doubt? And here's a bigger question. Why do you think it took nearly 3 months to charge Holly Johnson when there was video evidence, eyewitness testimony, and a clear victim? What does that say about how our justice system handles cases of violence against women, particularly Black women? And on an even deeper level, what does this case teach us about toxic relationships and co-parenting conflicts? How do we prevent situations where jealousy and anger between partners or ex-partners escalate to violence? How do we identify warning signs early enough to intervene? And how do we hold everyone involved accountable, not just the person who pulled the trigger, but also those who helped create the conditions for violence to occur? These aren't easy questions. They don't have simple answers. But they're questions we have to grapple with if we want to prevent more tragedies like Romeca's death. Here's what I need from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Holly Johnson will be convicted on all 6 charges? Do you think Carlos Smith should be charged? What do you make of his testimony denying involvement? Share this video with anyone you think needs to hear Romeca's story. Hit that like button if you believe her life deserves to be remembered and her case deserves justice. And make sure you subscribe and turn on that notification bell, because this case is far from over. There will be more court hearings, more revelations, and hopefully more accountability. You need to stay updated as this story continues to unfold. If you found this case as compelling and important as I did, visit the channel right now and check out the next video we have lined up for you. We cover cases just like this, stories where justice is delayed but not denied, victims who deserve to be remembered, and systems that need to be held accountable. There are so many cases that need your attention, so many families still waiting for answers. So don't stop here. Keep watching. Keep learning. Keep demanding that our justice system does better. This is one crime at a time, and we won't stop until every victim's voice is heard and every person responsible is held accountable for their actions.